So Brahms Capriccio in B minor. This is actually one of my favorite pieces of all time. I had an instant crush on this one. Let's do an extensive analysis on this work. It has many layers of complexity, so let's start by listening to the recording, where I will indicate the harmonic structure. In the second part we will dig deeper in Brahms' fascinating harmonic world. First of all, I want to thank Jane Coop for letting me use her excellent recording. Jane is a Canadian pianist. You can check out her YouTube and website below in the description. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you appreciate the content. Wow, amazing, right? Such a fantastic piece. On the one hand, it's very catchy and structurally straightforward. On the other hand, the harmony is very romantic and quite complex. The way Brahms treats his thematic material is subtle and not obvious at all, but truly amazing. It's not your typical grand architectural Brahms piece, that's for sure. But as some of you might know, Brahms really excelled in these small forms as well. So a capriccio is a form, or rather a character piece, that is very lively, typically fast, intense and virtuosic. The form is usually free, but we can see that Brahms used a ternary form, with two main themes in the A section. This quirky A section is contrasted with an expressive B section. Let's have a look at the A section and the first theme. This theme is actually the most important. We will hear it in different keys, but also in variations, sometimes very subtle. The home key is B minor. The first phrase ends here, and then a second similar but altered phrase is harmonized in E minor, perhaps. Right from the start, Brahms starts to use very tricky harmony. You can analyze this passage in E minor, like I did here, but the modulation is never completed. He even uses contours of a French augmented sixth chord in the key of A minor, but again, this key is also never reached. So eventually, there is no modulation, because Brahms gets back to an E minor chord here. I like to call this an inflection. You start to move in other keys, but never complete a cadence. You just move back to the home key. So this is not getting anywhere. Let's look at the passage from a different angle. As with music in general, the logic is often in the bass. Not so different here. There is a very clear chromatic line starting on B and ending with E. Actually, there are more chromatic lines, like for example here and here, against the B pedal tone. Also, the outer voices comprise very logical intervals, so perhaps Brahms thinks in terms of these lines separated by phrases. I will call this the second theme. Even though it's a bit early in the composition to have a second theme, it is just for clarity. The second theme has a different sound character because the melody is doubled in thirds, and the line descends instead of an ascending first theme. This descent is prolonged for quite some time. Brahms moves to the dominant F sharp. This dominant is alternated with the secondary dominant of the dominant. I like to call this the double dominant. In the next bar we sort of have a cadence in F sharp perhaps, but before F sharp is really established, Brahms uses this transitional phrase in F sharp to move back into the main B minor phrase. This transition material has a similar shape as the main theme. The leaps of the melody are different but in the same directions. Therefore, I will give it the same green color as the main theme. When we hear the transition for the second time, it now moves upwards, also chromatically. Brahms reaches the parallel major key of B minor, that is D major, and the second theme is then harmonized in this key. But Brahms does not like to repeat himself, and thus small alterations in the melody occur. The descending character is preserved, but the harmony is more static because of the pedal point on D in the bass. The bass descends further into a lower register. The harmony seems to move to the dominant of D major, that is A major. This is exactly what was happening before. Brahms started moving from B minor to its dominant F sharp, albeit with the insertion of C sharp, which is the double dominant. Not so different here. We have D major, which goes to A major via its double dominant E major. Brahms just goes one step further this time. The 7th scale degree of E major is a diminished chord on D sharp, namely D sharp, F sharp, A. He uses this chord in first inversion to get to E, and then E is used as the dominant for A. The transition theme still has the same direction and leaps as the first theme. The passage is repeated in D major again, but when Brahms reaches the transitional section, he uses a chromatic descending line. He briefly touches some chords in the key of A major, albeit borrowed from A minor. We expect A major because this was what he did the first time. The chord in question here is F major, which is the 6th scale degree Moll-Dur variant in A major, a borrowed chord for the American listeners under you. Quickly, this F major chord gets a 7th E flat, and it is used as a pivot to move to the F major tonality itself. This F dominant 7th chord functions as a secondary dominant for B flat, the subdominant in F. We then have a passing chord, due to chromatic lines, that moves into F in second inversion. This is followed by the Italian augmented 6th chord. So usually both D flat and B move outwards to C, which is the dominant in F. But Brahms takes advantage of the fact that D flat, F and B are anharmonically the same as C sharp, E double sharp and B, which is, ta-da, the dominant of F sharp. So F major is never really reached, instead we now have F sharp major. If you want to do a pivot modulation from one key to a key that is a half step higher, you can use the augmented sixth chord as a pivot. This augmented sixth chord becomes the dominant of your new desired key. The opposite is possible as well. So all this happened while the melody was still moving with the contours of the first theme. Quite genius, right? So why did Brahms move to F sharp? Well, this is the dominant of our home key B minor. Very gently and subtly, B minor / major is reached, and then D sharp is restored to D natural, and the first theme is stated again, with the same kind of harmony but a different accompaniment. The second theme is more or less the same, but then Brahms does something different when he reaches F sharp. Conventionally, a cadential dominant chord has a sixth and a fourth that move to the fifth and the third respectively. The fourth B indeed moves to the third A sharp, but the sixth is not D natural, but D sharp. Thus a B major element. This D sharp moves to E, which becomes the seventh of the F sharp dominant chord. Actually, B, D sharp and F sharp form a secondary dominant for the subdominant E. He moves to E, but as the first inversion of the second scale degree, so a C sharp minor chord. Now we can see that Brahms resolves the cadential chord conventionally to bring down the tension completely. B is reached, albeit B major instead of minor. Notice that the melody has now reached a lower register. Brahms slows down the pace and the accompaniment becomes intermittent, even adding to this calm character. The melody is still reminiscent of the first theme, although the intervals are very close together now. There is no lively character present anymore. The beautiful singing B section is not obvious either, certainly not from the harmonic point of view. We already start with a blurry harmony because the main melody is now written in C major tonality, whilst we hear a G dominant 7 pedal in the bass and accompaniment. I will indicate a suggestive harmony on top of this pedal without inversions. Also notice that the initial accompaniment in the middle voice is a continuation of the transition from just before, so there is a connection with the first theme, but very vague. The harmony is very tricky. Look at this chord, for example, C sharp, E, G, and B flat. This is a diminished 7th chord of D minor. This chord is briefly touched here, and then we have A flat C, which is the 6th scale degree in C, but with a lowered 6th. So again, a Muldur variant, or a borrowed chord if you prefer. If we look at macroscale, in the next bar we have a dominant, tonic, and then the secondary dominant of the subdominant. The subdominant is not reached, and Brahms now gives this very expressive diminished 7th chord, F sharp, A, C, and E flat. This chord leaves the dominant pedal and continues its descent till the next bar. The G dominant pedal is reached via this appoggiatura F sharp, which resolves to G. At microscale, we can distinguish a C minor element into A, C sharp, and E natural, which is the dominant of D minor. D minor is then sort of given here. It then transforms back into G, back into C. The main melody returns, albeit rhythmically altered. So C is not given, instead Brahms uses B as an appoggiatura for C. Same goes for the next bar. Pay close attention now. C sharp, E, G, and B flat is the chord we had before, and harmonically this chord is the same as D flat, E, G, and B flat. If you now take E as the bass, then you have E, G, B flat, and D flat. This chord is a diminished 7th chord that can move to F. F is the dominant in B flat major. This chord is given in the next bar, however, in its cadential context. B flat will not be established. In the next bar we can see a lot of sharps, so an indication that we go somewhere else than B flat major. So we have F sharp, A sharp, C sharp, and E. If we consider this chord to be in B flat major, we can explain it enharmonically as G flat, B flat, D flat, and E. This chord is a German augmented 6th chord. Perfectly reasonable because G flat and E can move to F. Then we have the dominant chord in B flat. But Brahms wants to move away to B major, so he uses the augmented 6th chord as a pivot. This F sharp 7th chord will function as the dominant to reach B major. This all happens while A sharp is continued as the highest voice, a very striking, complex, and very romantic passage. The chord that is the hardest to defend is this one, which actually can be viewed as an appoggiatura to the A sharp dominant 7th chord that comes next. Not very convincing, I know. You can also try to explain this entire passage in A sharp, after which a modulation to B major occurs. Nevertheless, it's a beautiful passage, freely treated but carefully written with a complex harmony which gives a clear direction to B, the key in which the other A section will start. Before we reach the so-called A prime section, there are a few more chords that we need to explain. Like here, for example, B sharp acts as an appoggiatura for the C sharp minor chord. Here at the micro level there is another secondary dominant of the double dominant, namely G sharp. So we have G sharp, then C sharp, followed by F sharp. Just a circle of fifths to reach B. A quick side note on this B section. Typically what you get with a lot of Romantic era composers, like for example Strauss and Wagner, but also Brahms, is that they start to use dominant pedals and wander around in a lot of different keys. They continuously avoid a tonic and move into a new dominant pedal. Often this happens with a cadential dominant chord in second inversion. Especially Strauss really dares to go very far in these constructions. In the A prime section, Brahms does not start with the first theme, but uses the second theme with a harmonization in B major. We see another pedal on top of which the descending melodic material is treated in a similar fashion as before. After this descent we end on the double dominant C sharp. From now onwards, Brahms will gradually build up the tension with an ascending line spanning over 10 bars. After this he will reach the subtle climax of the piece in the key of B minor. He starts with the transitional theme, but the first arpeggio is now descending instead of ascending. C sharp becomes the dominant key for F sharp major. However, in this F sharp major tonality there are elements of F sharp minor. Still, everything happens over the C sharp dominant pedal. It is here that F sharp is reached and the final ascending line starts. Look at the F sharp pedal in the soprano. Everything moves closer and closer together in a dissonant cluster, and this really adds to the tension. This cluster breaks open again into F sharp dominant 7th chord in second inversion. Even though harmonically the tension is rising, dynamically Brahms indicates the opposite, bring down the volume. A really striking passage. This contrasting construction passes smoothly into the beautiful subtle leggero climax, in which the main theme is hidden between a pedal in the bass and a descending repeating chromatic line in the soprano. This descending chromatic line with its syncopation is exactly the same as the one from the opening, where it was present in the bass. It moves from B to E as well. This passage is so good. The piece reaches a climax in a minor tonality in which elements from the main theme are hidden together with a melodic idea on top, and this all happens in an innocent piano dynamic. Hats off, Brahms. The second theme returns as well, also with an added but less prominent top voice. It descends again with a slightly altered melodic treatment. Take notice of the chromatic line here. The ideas stay the same now. We have some micro harmony going on over an F sharp pedal here, and then a remarkable variation of the first theme. The harmony is the same, but the theme is scattered and subdivided in arpeggiations. A beautiful, skillful treatment by Brahms, a master in variations. The second theme pops up again, and now the final descending line will start. The F sharp pedal returns, again with B major elements, D sharp and G sharp. These tones resolve, but gradually Brahms will start to move away from B minor to major. Keep in mind that B major is the secondary dominant of E, which is the subdominant in B minor. Just before the coda starts, Brahms uses a plagal cadence from E minor to B, subdominant to tonic. Remember that in the beginning, the second phrase was already in E minor, and the importance of the E minor tonality becomes even more clear now. This relation will also be present in the next and final part, the coda. The coda starts with the second theme in B major. The B pedal is continued to this point. You really get the feeling that the piece is going to end soon. But there is this striking deviation in which Brahms modulates chromatically to the very distant key of F major. So this is what happens. E and A sharp remain because A sharp is enharmonically a B flat. B in the bass moves to C, and this shift now causes the chord to become a dominant 7th chord in the key of F, namely C, E, G and B flat. F major is never given in the root position, so the F major tonality is never fully reached. Brahms doesn't want to reach F major because we are in the coda and the piece should end in B. This small uplifting inflection in F continues before another chromatic modulation takes place. Now C remains in the bass, but G moves to F sharp and E to D sharp. This chord can be viewed as a diminished 7th chord moving to E. The diminished 7th chord makes room for the real dominant 7th chord of E, here. Then, E major is reached, albeit in second inversion because of the B in the bass. G sharp moves to G natural, so we get an E minor chord. G natural moves chromatically down to F sharp, and at last we reach our final B major tonic triad. The piece sort of ends with a plagal cadence on a B pedal. Take notice that there was a chromatic line present again, here. Also take notice how Brahms slowly liquidates the melodic features here, with a slight rhythmic shift. The melodic line is barely alive and slightly moves upward one more time. What a beautiful ending this is. And what a brilliant piece of music this is. There are so many things going on. Yet, in its entirety, this all seems so natural. For the listener, the piece retains its dignity and elegance. Truly very skillful.